Well, good afternoon, and welcome to this session where I have with me John Dressel from Fluor and Lawrence from Mustang. And thanks, guys, for being here and helping with this interview. And the topic of this discussion will be usability. It's a hot topic these days, and I have some questions for you. First, to set the basis for our discussion is that the projects that we see today are seems to be getting larger and more complex. And I see multi-billion-dollar projects. When I worked for Fluor and we had a $1 billion project, we were happy, but now I see like $18, $20 billion projects. Well, what do you see about that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, you are correct. The projects are getting much more complex and much larger, requiring us to change the way we execute the projects. We use multiple offices, 24/7 engineering, that type of thing, and to do that, we need to utilize the software tools differently.
Right.
They have to be capable of a lot of integration. We're going to a lot of cloud-based software distribution. So our execution has changed considerably because of the market.
Joe, what do you think?
Well, with Mustang, we're not quite as big as Fluor, so we do some mega projects. It's a lot of offshore type work, so it's quite big projects, but we also do some smaller and medium-sized projects. And we find that with those mega projects, you're basically scaling up. We're able to do that with our Intergraph software. You can run smaller projects, medium projects, large projects, but when you get into the larger projects, we find that it's much more complex much more difficult to keep the data integrated correctly and properly and checked across the platforms. And so we've developed tools with Intergraph's software using their automation layer to help us do that sort of stuff.
Right. And what I was trying to focus also on is, okay, we have these tools, we have these complex projects, but what would be helping in productivity and meeting these challenges? If I give you a lot more functionality, would that help, or would that make it even more complex and be counterproductive in using these tools?
Additional functionality does not always translate to additional productivity.
Yeah.
But making the functionality that's there now probably more user-friendly, more consistent with a more consistent user environment across the product lines, that type of thing will probably improve productivity. And also better education tools to help our users become educated better to utilize the tools properly. Can translate, I think, to higher productivity. What's your opinion?
Well, I do believe that there is a great opportunity for functionality here, and like you say, you've got to be very careful about consolidating and adding functionality, because then you basically add layers of complexity to the tool. So what we'd like to try to do is basically distill down our work processes to the bare minimum and then build up from there as we require. And sometimes that means that we have to develop tools ourselves and make recommendations to Intergraph, of course, to help us with those things. And so I do think there's a great opportunity to allow this functionality to help us out, but we have to be very careful in how we implement it.
Right, yeah, I agree. And that was aiming for that, the more functionality is not always, a guarantee for, more productivity. I see a lot of young new engineers coming on, and I think the more buttons, the more maybe confused. I think a user experience is very important these days to get the productivity that we're looking for. So do you see a lot of, you mentioned training, which is I think an excellent point. Do you see a lot of young guys coming on board and be able to use those applications as they are, or you get pushback on the complexity of using those tools?
Today's people are very computer savvy, especially the young ones coming on board,
okay.
and so they embrace the idea of the user environment and the tool environment. Some of the people that have come up in the industry in the past have had bad experiences with automation, that type of thing. They tend to shy away a little bit, but the new younger ones coming on the market, they embrace the tools tremendously. And they're very easy to adapt into the new situations and the new environments.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. Mustang has a mentoring program where we bring in younger engineers and we actually run them through using our Smart Plant P&ID package, and they really learn a lot, and they're actually productive fairly quickly. when we talk about some of our older folks, say you bring in a designer from AutoCAD, it's a little more difficult because I mean, though the softwares are maybe similar, you use them as a drafting package, actually getting them to understand the much more complex workflows that we require can be a bit of a challenge.
Right, right. Right. So you know, I've been talking a lot about in the past couple of years actually about task-based engineering, and so my idea was that we need to filter the user experience, the basically functionality, and gear that to do a certain job. So you do specification, or you do wiring, or you do installation details, and you only create an environment for that particular task or for that particular person, a process engineer or instrument designer. So, John, what do you think? Would that help with the deployment on the projects?
I'm a smart plant instrumentation user, and it's very task-based. It's very task-oriented because it's modularized to leverage the tasks. But we also need to have, I think, a rule manager type environment, more rules, more automation functionality for each task. It's customized for the task at hand. I think that would improve the task-based orientation. Also, there's a lot of different capabilities of the users involved, and so the different capabilities can cause some issues sometimes because somebody may be very skilled at one task but not so much at another.
Right, so that's an interesting point. So you say, okay, task-based engineering, okay, we have it already kind of in smart instrumentation, but on top of that you would like to see rules that the user will be assisted while doing that task.
Exactly.
Okay, well, what's your take on that task-based?
P&ID is not necessarily as task-oriented, maybe as modularized as some of these other applications, but we do have deliverables, and that's basically our function. With Smart Plant P&ID is generate those deliverables, whether it's a P&ID drawing, which is basically a graphic report, or a line list, a valve list, all those different deliverables. We have workflows and procedures that we have to follow in order to make sure we're generating valid documents with those things. So sometimes we need, or we look for some tools to help us troubleshoot some of those documents, and maybe we can work with Intergraph to try to come up with some solutions there.
Yeah, right. Okay, a good point. So what else do you think we can do to
in line
help
with what
with
he just said, the P&IDs are even task-oriented when you think about the different technologies. Like, for instance, the P&ID has the pipers do the line equipment and line lists and that kind of stuff. And the instrument systems should be done by the control systems people. One person can't be expected to do it all. So we could actually split P&ID up into task-based orientation and improve the tool, I think, in that mechanism. So again, there's all kinds of ways you can improve the software and the work processes, but just education is probably one of the key points.
Right.
And maybe looking at the projects a little bit differently, rethinking how we execute and use the tools would help.
Yeah, and in Mustang, what we've done, similar on this task-based basis, we don't necessarily break it up into tasks so much as we break it up into responsibilities, where we have a design group that's really responsible for the graphic picture of the P&ID, but we also have a lot of data behind that drawing, and the engineer has to make sure that that data is managed correctly. The way the software is configured now, it's almost where we have to have the designers, you don't have to, but it's difficult for the designer sometimes to manage some of that stuff, and you've got to go talk to the engineers and make sure they're managing that data and give them the access and the tools that allow them to do that, so the designers aren't necessarily having to be burdened with that as well.
We need to get more people involved in the P&ID development, especially in the data area, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that is what also I was thinking about task-based, because on the P&ID you got instrument engineers filling in maybe the tag numbers, and mechanical engineers doing maybe some data, and process engineers. So you got different players on it, and you want to create maybe an environment for the different players to make it easy to do their part of the job.
That's exactly right.
So I think that's maybe you agree that will be a good step. And the other step is, I think that's a good point that both of you made about the training. And now I started, a year or 2 years ago, the web-based training, the virtual training or whatever. Do you think that is the future of training people on these type of tools rather than going to a class like we probably all did in the past?
Well, the web-based training proved invaluable to us when we rolled out SmartPlant P&ID, or SmartPlant 3D rather.
Yeah, right.
The SmartPlant 3D tool was a tremendous learning curve. And if it wasn't for the web-based training mechanism that Intergraph provided, we would not have been able to roll it out and bring it up to speed as quickly as we did. And I see that you're adapting that to other tools as well.
Correct.
I'm looking very forward to the one for SmartPlant instrumentation. I think P&ID, I think, is getting ready to roll out.
Yeah, we have one for P&ID.
Yeah, they have
And
one
so, yeah, I'm very in favor of the web-based training mechanisms.
Right.
So I think we have a great opportunity there.
Right.
Yeah.
You think so, Joe?
I totally agree. Web-based is the way to go, especially with these global companies. It's very difficult to at a drop of a hat fly to the Philippines to give a training class or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And so these web-based training classes are definitely one of those options that you can get into. On the other side of the coin, I do think there's a lot of value sitting shoulder to shoulder with the guy to train him to some of the details and that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that there's not a place for web-based training, because I really think there is, but I wouldn't want to exclude the shoulder to shoulder.
I think the web-based training is a good introductory type training to make sure everybody's had the same amount, same quality of training. And then you can be more specific with your subject matter experts and stuff and do one-on-one training and get them up to a higher level of knowledge.
Right, cool guys. So yeah, I appreciate your time and being here. So I guess we agree that this project's getting larger and more complex these days, and with that, there are challenges. There are requests for more capabilities in the software, but on the other hand, it is this balance between, more capabilities, which is more buttons, and on the other hand, you want to make it simpler. So I think we kind of sort of had some consensus that a task-based environment to make it easier for the person to do his specific task in the environment would help with the productivity. And then you guys brought also the good point for the training. So I think that is also something that we try to do with the web-based, but certainly ideas from your side are welcome. Any last suggestions, comments on the usability of these tools?
I have a comment. I'm chair of the technical user forums for the process and power community, and one thing I would like to do is commend Intergraph for the way that they've been responsive to the customers, listening to the users and adapting what our suggestions are into the tools and into the products. You're to be commended for stepping up and listening to your customers and
appreciate it, John.
Responding accordingly.
Yeah, and I'll totally agree with that. Another thing that I would like to point out is where we find a lot of our success with this software is the fact that it's an open-ended software where you can actually go into the database. It's not closed. You can make modifications if you need to. Do what you have to tweak it. Develop your own automation if you need to. Intergraph has developed a lot of great tools for that. And so
rule-based stuff.
Rule-based and all that kind of stuff. So that's really where we're going to make our difference, I think.
Well, we want to give you, of course, the opportunity to be competitive in the market with the tools, and not everybody does it exactly the same, as we all know. So yeah, good suggestions, good comments. I really appreciate John and Joe to take the time for this little interview, and well, I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this discussion, and I guess get some pointers to take home with, and at least I did. Got some ideas, and with that, I would like to thank you.